Hi YouTube, it's Francis here. Thank you for coming back to my channel. If this is your first time here, I bid thee welcome. There is a subscribe button and a bell below if you want to be notified as to when I upload more content, which I do on a rather ad hoc basis. So yes, it is absolutely freezing here in Adelaide, South Australia. I think it was a whole 14 degrees Celsius. Earlier on, I've got one of my thick woolly jumpers out and I'm still cold, but that's beside the point. This video I'm wanting to, and I'm beginning to compete with planes, sort of address a few of the topics or recurring themes that have been happening, and in particular because I've just recently watched sort of an update for the next month, or for this month actually, for June, that one of the probably more intuitive, futuristic people, I don't know what you would call them, someone that I do, well, I'm currently following at the moment, he's mentioned a few things, and for me they all sort of tie in with the energetics, the metaphysics, and also the current cosmic happenings at the moment. So I thought I might share some of these recurring or similar themes, and it'll be interesting to see if anybody who is here is sort of tapping into these energies as well. And in particular, I think, well, from my point of view, it would almost be like it's a flow-on effect from the lunar eclipse that we had in May, because that was a big one, around the full moon in Scorpio. And depending on astrologer, we can be continually feeling those effects of that lunar eclipse up until 3 months. Some people even say 6 months afterwards. So it is a very interesting time to just take note of things and where you are at. And then we've got to add on to that the whole situation globally, even if we want to break it down to even personally. Here in Australia, we've had a new change of government with big bells and whistles of change, but it's also revealed what's actually happened behind the scenes, so to speak. Some of us weren't surprised of the previous government, and yeah, the realization is that we are going to be going through some really rocky times. So what this person I was following was saying sort of tapped into the energy, or what I've been noticing, what I've been sort of talking about for the last couple of years with these astrological updates. And there has been an underlying theme right from when I started taking more account of the astrological happenings around the moon. And this theme is one of release. And as I said, this is what I'm finding of interest, because people from all different avenues and spiritual belief systems and interpretations are all beginning to come to a single pointed focus, so to speak. And what I found of interest was that they were talking about probably going through a stage, or we may actually be in it, where it'd be almost like the past is repeating itself, but we have sort of moved on a little bit, so we're not hooked up in the past, so to speak. We're not emotionally attached to it. We're almost like we're observing it. We are able to set a little bit of distance and not be so emotionally attached from it. And a lot of this is around identity, who we are, who we identify with. Not only is it on an individual level, but also on a more global level as well, with different identity shifts coming through, changes, and an underlying theme of release, surrender, trust, in a bigger scheme of things, whether you call it God, Goddess, ancestors, holy guardian angels, spirit guides, whatever. But there is this push of stepping out from the emotional attachment and allowing things to happen. So what this intuitive was talking up more about was, it's almost like echoes from the past are rising up. And this is something that I've sort of felt for the last 2 years, especially when the pandemic hit and we were all forced into isolation for those first, I think it was 3 months at first. And it was almost like everybody in the world was forced to look at themselves, at their carbon footprint, their interactions with each other, human being, species on the planet, how we treated Mother Earth, and our placement in it. And as it has continued, even though we've sort of got to a stage now where I think everybody's over it and the world is opening up, even though the pandemic to a certain level is still there, our minds have shifted, our awareness has shifted, our consciousness has shifted, our identity has shifted. But we are still being forced, maybe forced is a too strong a word, we're still being encouraged to look at, as he said, echoes from the past. So it's almost like on a more global level, shadow stuff, things that we have not identified with correctly or dealt with correctly, globally, personally, is coming up again for us to deal with it once and for all. And some of these issues or aspects have come through even down this person said, they call it storylines, through our lineage, through our DNA, through our global history, our, say, racial history, countries' history, where it's now all coming out to the forefront, and we're having to deal with it once and for all. And it's quite interesting because last night there was a documentary or an expose or something about what's happening in Canada, and one of the I don't know, can't remember if it was a home or a school, but back in the 50s or 60s, could have even been a little bit earlier with that, in relation to Indigenous children, how a lot of them went missing, and now it's been found that they, I don't know if were murdered or killed off or what the situation is, but this is now coming to the forefront. Here in Australia, we've still got the stolen generation. With our new government, there has been a record number of Indigenous people finally being involved in the political system and getting seats in Parliament. There's a stronger push for women, and also a higher number than usual representation for independents. So it's like our two-party preferred system is no longer pleasing people. People are wanting a wider choice and their individual voices to be heard, that mainstream is not listening. So there's all these identity shifts, all these happenings in relation to how we identify ourselves with all these storylines or aspects from the past that we haven't dealt with. And I'm quite sure there's an underlying storyline, so to speak, in relation to what's happening over in Ukraine and Russia that is yet to be resolved. So with all these aspects rising to the surface again, we are all being given opportunities, I guess, to deal with these issues, these aspects, probably on a more higher vibrational level, so to speak, because we've gained better insight, better knowledge, and we're no longer caught right up in them, where we are, I won't say blinded by emotions, but where we are thinking extremely emotionally as opposed to more rationally from a clearer point of view and this direction. There is also a need, or sort of like energies are speeding up, and you can sort of sense it, that these things need to be cleared up because they are stopping the healing process to finally emerge. And I understand, especially here in Australia, we've got middle of winter, it's freezing, everything, cost of living's just gone through the roof. Unfortunately, the new government doesn't have a magical wand to put things away. So there's going to be a lot of people who probably healing isn't on their radar at the moment. They can't see it. But this is where the sort of faith, the belief in spirit guides, guardian angels, higher consciousness, that the universe has our back, that there are higher forces at play. And like with anything, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that is happening that we may not be consciously aware of at the moment because it hasn't come to the forefront. And it could be simple things like a shift in consciousness, how we view things, a breaking down of old behavioural patterns, old perceptions, how we've been taught, sort of a refocusing. And a lot of this stuff too, if it has been deeply ingrained, does take time to change. And it is this patience that we need to endure, and also a degree of tenacity, I suppose that's the appropriate word, to not give up, that we keep slowly chipping away at our dreams for, or visions of a more just, more humane, more compassionate world. And at the moment it might not seem that we can personally achieve it, especially on an individual level, but do not give up on your dreams. Do not give on that ability, because individuals can make change. I think that's the very important thing. We may not think that we can change something globally, but we can change our life, which can then encourage or affect someone else's life to change. And it's sort of like that pebble in the pond analogy, where we make a change in our life and that has this flow and effect for other people around us, and before we know it, there is more change. And we've seen that in recent times with the Black Lives Matter movement, the Me Too movement. Those momentums may have seem at the moment to have petered out, but there is still a lot of work happening behind the scenes. Not everything is in the public eye. Not everything wants to be out there blowing the trumpets and banging their drums. So this is the reason not to give up when we consciously are working, especially on a more energetic level, for the change. But also, I suppose another aspect too is because there are a lot of shifts and releasing happening, that if you're more sensitive to the changing of the energies, this is a good time to come back to your boundaries, come back to what is important to you, to the grounding, to almost not get too emotionally attached to things. A lot of people, a number of people recently have indicated that emotions that they thought they might have processed before have started to come up again. And this is all part of this identity shift. And probably one of the best ways that I have learnt, and I have been very stubborn, and it's taken me a while to learn this, in relation to these emotions, especially from the past, because we can't change the past. A lot of them is because I haven't at the time processed them properly, that I have, due to situations and circumstances, have almost taken a sort of step up a lift, buried these emotions, and now they're wanting to be felt. So again, this is very much like shadow work. They need, or the inner child work, these emotions, these feelings are wanting to be felt. And the best way to move through them is to give yourself time and space and allow them to be felt. You don't need to be caught up in the emotional attachment, but if there's grief rising, feel the grief. Let it rise up, then release it. If there is anger, feel the anger. Find out what you're actually angry at. And is it something that you can actually do something about? Or is it just a reaction to a situation? Is it masking something? Because anger is one of these emotions that does tend to mask something else, and often it's sadness. Anger is sort of like a reaction, and there's a deep sense of sadness or grief underneath it. And sometimes we need a good cry. That's a good way for the body to release things. And then once you've had a good cry or scream or whatever you need, what can you then do to move those emotions completely out? Whether it's going for a walk in nature, digging in the garden, doing some physical activity, going to the gym, saying mantras or prayers, being around friends and family and loved ones. Sometimes it's just watching animals doing their thing in nature. I have acquired, I think that's the right word, there's a little kitten, sort of mini cat, little cat, and it's quite amusing watching what amuses young cats, little kittens, things like leaves, pigeons, which has taken over my backyard. It hasn't got to the stage yet where I'm wanting it to chase the pigeons away, but it's just watching them almost in awe, and just minor little things that will amuse it actually is starting to amuse me as well. So there's a flow and effect, time to let go. So while this plane is flying overhead, if you're watching this and you are feeling that maybe you are in a washing machine on a rinse cycle and the past is resurfacing again for you, understand that that's perfectly natural. At this present point in time, this is what seems to be happening in a lot of areas. And try firstly to be gentle on yourself, then look at what's resurfacing. It may be a relationship, or you might find yourself in a relationship with somebody which has similar emotions, or things are bubbling up to the surface of a previous relationship that you haven't quite dealt with, but this time you can, with more wisdom and more hindsight. It could be news events, it could be any sort of situation that you've got the sort of deja vu feeling about, been there, done that, but this time it's almost like the universe is giving you a second opportunity to make good once and for all, and then you can release and let go. And when we do that, when we're sort of completely clearing out all the clutter, we've got plenty of room now for the new wave of energy that will be coming through probably by the end of the year, maybe next year. I don't know what the planetary alignments are at the moment in relation to the next eclipse cycle at the end of the year, but yes, it'll be very interesting to see what will be happening there. And when I'm beginning to waffle, so yeah, that's what I just wanted to talk about. Just touch base, remind everybody to breathe. We will get there. Things are changing. We might not see everything on the surface, but I think we'll be given a reminder to, again, to release, surrender. This is our emotional attachment, our hanging on from the past. No, it's really a good time to let go and go with the flow. Breathe, allow the stuff to come to the surface, to feel, and get back, find that sense of peace and calm, whether internally or externally. Change is happening, and we are part of it. Blessings.